What if I told you that the perfect-looking deep hole you spent all morning drilling is probably completely empty? And that the real Bream hotspot is somewhere you've been ignoring all season long? Today we're going to tear down one of the biggest myths in winter fishing. The idea that any deep spot is a winter bream magnet. I'm going to show you the crucial difference between a simple dead hole and a true wintering area where fish actually stack up. The answer isn't in the depth, it's in something most anglers completely miss. So let me ask you right now. Do you believe the deepest spot is always the best spot? Let me know in the comments before you watch the rest. This might just change your entire approach. Let's be honest. Every winter, countless hours are wasted staring at a motionless float over what seems like the perfect spot on the fish finder. The old wisdom says, fish go deep in winter. And that's not wrong, but it's only half the story. We've been taught to look for the biggest number on the screen and just set up camp for the day. It's an easy rule to follow. It makes logical sense, right? Cold water on top, warmer, more stable water on the bottom. But fish aren't that simple. They don't just swim to the bottom and shut down. They're not just looking for depth. They're looking for a complete winter home. And that's why so many anglers go home empty-handed, convinced the fish just weren't biting. So let's start with the classic scenario. You're out on the ice, maybe on a new lake. You pull out your electronics, or even just a weighted line, and you find it. A nice 25-foot hole surrounded by 15-foot flats. It looks perfect, like a big bowl in the lake bed. The textbook definition of a wintering spot. You drill your hole right in the center, bait your hook, and drop it down. You're confident. This has to be the place. But an hour goes by, then two. Nothing, not even a nibble. You're sitting on what I call a sucker hole. It looks right, it feels right, but it's a biological desert. Now let's break down why that perfect bowl is often lifeless. First, think about oxygen. In a stagnant deep bowl with no water movement, the decomposition of leaves and other organic matter on the bottom can use up a lot of the available oxygen. Fish, even sluggish winter fish, need oxygen to survive. If the bottom of that hole is a dead zone, they won't be there, no matter how deep or seemingly safe it is. It's like a basement with no windows or air vents. It might be a shelter from the storm, but you can't live there. The fish know this, even if we forget to check for it. Another major factor is food. Bream don't completely stop eating in the winter. They slow down, for sure, but they still need to feed. A simple muddy bowl often lacks the forage base to support a large school of fish. There are no weeds, no rocks for invertebrates to cling to, and no easy access to shallower feeding areas. So, even if the temperature and oxygen are okay, the fish have no reason to stay. It's like a rest stop on the highway with no restaurant or gas station. They might pass through, but they are not going to set up a permanent residence. A true wintering spot has to have a pantry nearby. This brings us to the key distinction. We need to stop looking for a hole and start looking for a wintering pit. What's the difference? A hole is just a depression. A pit is a complex piece of structure. It's part of a larger system. Think of it this way. A hole is a tent pitched in an empty field. A wintering pit is a log cabin built next to a stream and a food plot. One is temporary, barren shelter. The other is a sustainable home. The fish are looking for the log cabin, and that's what we need to learn to identify on our electronics and maps. So, what's the first ingredient of a true wintering pit? Structure. I'm not just talking about depth, I mean physical objects. An old submerged creek channel running through a flat is prime structure. A sharp drop-off with a pile of rocks at the bottom is structure. A submerged tree line or stump field at the edge of the deep water is grade A structure. These objects give Bream a sense of security. They can tuck in behind a log or a rock pile, getting out of any subtle current and hiding from predators. A bare, muddy bowl offers none of this. It's an empty room. Fish hate empty rooms. Let's visualize this. Imagine you're looking at your fish finder. You see a 20-foot hole. Okay, that's interesting. But now, imagine you see a 20-foot hole where one side is a gentle slope and the other side is a nearly vertical wall of rock. That rock wall is the key. That's the structure. The bream won't be suspended in the middle of the hole. They'll be packed in tight against that rock wall, using it for cover. That's the spot you need to drill. Not the dead center, but right on top of that structural element. The second key ingredient is proximity to feeding zones. As I said, bream still eat. They often make short, slow migrations to nearby shallower flats to feed, especially during stable, warmer periods or low light hours. A great wintering pit will always have a direct, safe travel route to one of these areas. It could be a saddle, a small channel, or just a consistent depth contour leading out of the deep water. An isolated hole in the middle of nowhere doesn't have this. The fish are trapped. They would have to cross a vast, exposed no man's land to get food, and they won't do that. So when you're looking at your map, don't just circle the deepest spot. Look at what's around it. Is there a large 5 to 10 foot deep flat right next to it? Perfect. That's a potential dining room. Now look for the connection. Is there a defined edge or channel leading from the deep water to that flat? That's their hallway. You want to set up your ambush at the doorway, right where the deep water meets that travel route. That's a high percentage spot, a place where fish will be moving through, even if they aren't actively feeding at that exact moment. Here's the third ingredient, and it's the one 99% of anglers completely ignore: subtle current. We often think of current as a river thing, but almost every body of water has some form of movement, even if it's just wind-driven or the result of a small inlet or outlet. This subtle current is a lifeline. It brings fresh, oxygenated water into the deep pits and also carries microscopic food particles. Fish instinctively know this. A completely stagnant hole is a dead end. A hole with even a whisper of current is a living system. How do you find this? Sometimes you can't see it on a map. This is where on-the-ice observation comes in. When you drop your lure down the hole, does it hang perfectly straight, or does it drift slightly to one side? If it's drifting, even a tiny bit, you've found some flow. Areas around points, narrows between islands, or the mouths of bays are all likely spots to find this subtle current. A deep hole located in one of these areas is 10 times more likely to hold fish than a perfectly still basin in the middle of the lake. Let's put this all together with a real-world example on a reservoir. The old way is to find the old river channel, go to the deepest outside bend, and drill there. You might catch a few. The new way is to find that same outside bend, but instead of fishing the deepest part, you use your electronics to find a washout area behind a large rock or a point of land along that channel edge. This small spot, maybe only a few feet shallower, is a current break. It has depth, structure, and is a perfect ambush point with food drifting by. That's the honey hole. Think about the fish's energy budget. In winter, every movement counts. They want to sit in a place where they are protected from current, but where the current can bring food right to their doorstep. They don't want to be out in the main flow fighting it all day. And they don't want to be in a stagnant pool with no food delivery service. They want to be in the sweet spot right on the edge. The eddy behind a big rock in the river channel is the absolute perfect example of this principle in action. Now, how do you apply this without super expensive electronics? You can do a lot with just a simple flasher, or even just a heavy weight and a line. The key is to drill more holes. Don't just drill one hole in the middle of the spot you picked on the map. Start on the edge, in the shallower water, and drill a line of holes across the feature. As you drop your weight in each hole, pay attention. Are you feeling a hard, rocky bottom or a soft, muddy bottom? A hard bottom is almost always better. It signals structure and a cleaner environment. Also, pay attention to your line. As mentioned, Watch for that subtle drift that indicates current. Feel for the tick as your weight hits a rock versus the thud of it sinking into mud. This old-school method is just as effective. It just takes more time and effort. You are essentially painting a mental picture of the bottom, one hole at a time. The goal is to find the transition zones where mud turns to rock or where a slope suddenly gets steeper. These edges are where the fish will be. Here's a common mistake I see all the time. An angler finds a good-looking spot and immediately starts chumming. They dump a bunch of bait down the hole, thinking they'll attract the fish. But if you're sitting over a lifeless, oxygen-deprived bowl, all you're doing is feeding the mud. The fish aren't there and won't be coming. You have to confirm you're in a fish-holding area, cheer, cheer, first. And then you can think about using bait to keep them there. Find the structure, find the fish, then feed the fish. Let's consider a natural lake. Many natural lakes have deep basins that look like perfect wintering spots. But often, the largest schools of bream will be in a slightly shallower area connected to that basin, especially if it has some remaining green weeds. Why? Because those green weeds are still producing a little bit of oxygen and holding tiny invertebrates and minnows. The bream will relate to the edge of that weed bed, right where it drops off into the deeper water. They get the safety of the depth and the food and oxygen from the weeds. It's the best of both worlds. So, instead of just looking for the deepest water on the lake, look for the deepest weeds. Use your auger as a probe. If you drill a hole and bring up green, healthy-looking cabbage weeds from 12 or 15 feet, that's a fantastic sign. The fish are more likely to be near that deep weed edge than in the sterile 30-foot basin 100 yards away. It's a completely different way of thinking. You're not looking for depth's sake. You're looking for the best available habitat. This also explains why early and late ice can be so productive in different areas. Early in the winter, the weeds are still healthier and providing more oxygen, so fish might hold in those shallower, weed-related spots. As winter progresses and snow cover block sunlight, those weeds die off and begin to consume oxygen. The fish are then forced to move out to the more classic structure-oriented pits in the main lake basin that have better water quality. It's not random. They are following the best available conditions. So the next time you head out, I want you to try this. Pull up the map of your lake. Find the biggest, most obvious community hole. Now ignore it. Instead, look for a secondary spot. Look for a smaller hole, but one that has a sharp drop-off on one side, or an old roadbed running through it, or is located right off a major point. It might be 5 feet shallower than the main hole, but it has all the right ingredients. It has the structure and the edge that fish crave. I bet you'll be surprised by the results. The bottom line is this: stop thinking like a human and start thinking like a fish. A fish is driven by 3 things: safety, food, and stable conditions. A simple, deep hole only offers one of those, and sometimes not even that. A true wintering pit offers all 3. It's a complex environment. Your job as an angler is to be a detective, to piece together the clues from your map and your electronics to find those complete habitats. Once you start seeing the underwater world this way, those empty holes will become obvious, and the real honey holes will start to stand out. So, to wrap it all up, we've established that not all deep holes are created equal. We have the barren, empty bowl versus the living, breathing, wintering pit. The difference isn't the depth, it's the combination of structure, access to food, and subtle, life-giving current. The biggest takeaway, the real aha moment, is this: you're not looking for a place for fish to hide. You're looking for a fish's entire winter apartment complex. It needs a safe bedroom, a nearby kitchen, and a secure hallway connecting them. Thinking this way will completely change how you read your maps and your electronics. You'll stop wasting precious time on dead water and start targeting areas with real, untapped potential. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this. If this video blew your mind a little, or even just confirmed a hunch you've had, do me a favor and hit that like button. And make sure you subscribe for more tips that challenge the old way of doing things. Now for the comments. What's the biggest dead zone you've ever wasted a whole day fishing on? Share your story below. Let's all learn from it.